Hi, everybody, and welcome. Some ground rules before we get started. May we ask you to turn on your cameras and mute your mics unless you have a question. We would like you to use the chat box to make this event as interactive as possible. There is no strong school without an alumni and not a strong alumni without a school. We tend to use our business and professional clubs driven by our school professors and volunteers to help you to stay on top of your game. This event is made possible thanks to the members of our digital transformation club. The Flirik alumni offering is focused around 3 key elements: career and businesses, networks and activity, and lifelong learning. If you are not yet a paying member, I would like to encourage you to become a paying member of our organization and participate for free in many of our events. These are the upcoming events for fall 2020. And I would also like to invite you to join us at the Global Alumni Winter Reunion on the 3rd of December. All this is also made possible thanks to our event partners and our alumni partners. And now, without further ado, I would like to present to you Mieke de Ketelaere, Program Director, AI at IMEC. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for tuning in to this seminar on AI, Hype or Potential. Today, we won't look at the algorithms or the technology behind the systems, but more at surrounding topics such as the process, the people, the strategy, the data. For this, I have a very exciting panel to look at the state of the art today, but also at the future, where to go to. Now, before we start, I'd like to demystify a little bit the word AI. For the sake of the definition for today, let's call AI a system that has the ability to learn by itself without being programmed with rules, and that based on that learning is able to make automated decisions. So let's take this as a definition for today, and it's time now to move to my panel. Let me first introduce you Dr. Chizzy from KBC. He has a very interesting function that he will explain to us. And maybe it's also interesting to explain to the audience how KBC has come to this exciting AI proposition as they have today.
All right. So my role at KBC, I'm the Chief Data and Analytics Officer of the group. For KBC, AI, it's a crucial component within its strategy. And KBC realized that without AI, she will actually lose its position in the market. AI enable us to understand better the needs of our customers and to cater the need even before they even expressed it. Mm-hmm. I think that in the last products that we released to the market, and also with Kate that will come by the end of this year, we'll be able to demonstrate how AI can actually contribute the benefit of our customers.
Very exciting. So can you explain a little bit more how you reached that point in time? What were the different steps you took to reach that point, to make that so visible to the outside world, to have this AI in your strategy?
Yeah. First of all, the first step is full acknowledgement of the top management at KBC that this is an important topic. This topic has been personally promoted by our CEO, Mr. Johan Tess, and KBC invested a lot of resources of first educating the organization that this is an important one, but also taking into account very deep experiments within the domain, showing that it actually can create new revenue and it's profitable. Today, AI is the core business of KBC, and we're enabled to produce more than 900 use cases of AI running in production all over the group, not just in Belgium, but within all the 6 countries of KBC. And we are continue to do our steps on that domain, leveraging on a very big AI team that I'm leading. It consists above 100 people. Most of them are data scientists, which actually have PhD. Mm-hmm. We have people around the countries from 22 different nationalities. So KBC is recruiting globally talents for this kind of group. And I hope that also in the near future, more of our products and our AI platform will be revealed to the public.
Okay, exciting. I retain that C-level involvement is very important, that it's not a one shot to get there, that in the team you have to have multiple disciplines in there. Let's come back to that later in the debate. I'd like to pass the word to Professor Vianen. AI is not new to you. I mean, it's been in your life for such a long time, and still you decide in this series for next year to include AI more and more in your digital disruption program. Why is this? Can you please explain?
Yeah, so AI is indeed not new to me. It brings me back to my own PhD, where I used neural networks, support vector machines, and machine learning basically to detect fraud for insurance claims. So that is in my past. Now, throughout the years, I've seen the algorithms evolve, not that much as most people would like to admit, but definitely the processing power, the communication capabilities, yeah, allow you to go from, let's say, what was absolutely not real time to what now is absolutely nowcasting and real-time decision support. So that is something that makes it interesting for a broader audience than what it was 20 years ago, let's say. So now we have algorithms, we have open source, we also have skills in the market to make these techniques widely available and almost for free in the market, so that everyone basically can use them. So, and that has changed the world. On the other hand, there's a lot of hype around AI, and I think it's due time that we start demystifying and start to see the forest for the trees, what is real and what is like over the top in terms of the claims that are made.
I absolutely agree with you. And I think our third panel persons will, Jeroen Lemaire, CEO and co-founder from In the Pocket. And I think he knows everything about it because you didn't jump on the hype of AI. AI has grown into your company, into the processes and in the services you deliver over time. Can you explain more about this, please?
Exactly. So In the Pocket basically is a product developer. So we develop, we develop digital products for companies like Lufthansa, KBC, Colruyt, and so on. It could be apps, websites, cloud infrastructure, APIs. So we juggle with many technologies there. AI has been solidly growing within the company, but not as an extra team and not as extra services that we want to just put in the market also, but it's part of our digital strategy. It's part of our digital product development. And so that is what we are trying to achieve with the client. So that for example, I think a way of looking at it would be in terms of Kate by KBC is that you don't ask the question, okay, this is how we interact with customers. And now could someone please use some AI on top of this? Could someone sprinkle the AI magic stardust? So basically the question still is, how do we want to interact with our customers in the future? And there are many issues to be addressed in that area. It's service design, it's software development, and AI, of course. So you have to bring these perspectives together. That's what we try to achieve at In the Pocket.
So basically you integrate it in the current processes.
We integrate it in the processes, we integrate it with the business strategy. Yeah.
Excellent. Maybe I continue with a small question on top of this. If you see that AI adoption is failing right now, only 15% of people go beyond that pilot prototype phase. What is the main reason of that?
I think that currently we are in a state of disillusionment about the technology. Too much was promised to us in the past. I think most of us are familiar with the Gartner hype cycle, or they have a specific hype cycle for AI, where you see that many of trends within AI are now moving to the slope of disillusionment. The trough of disillusionment. And the reason is that, for example, a good case could be Duplex by Google. 2 years ago, we all saw the demo by Google's CEO of an AI voice calling a hairdresser and seamlessly, very smoothly, just having a conversation and booking a meeting with that hairdresser. So me too, I was amazed, and I thought, well, okay, the future is here, let's do this. And so what our company is going to do then is they're going to start up these proof of concepts, because they want those quick wins that have a huge impact on the business. But that's not how it works. It's not just a use case that you put on top of your strategy and then magic happens. It's a much more fundamental search, and I think the promises made were false a bit. It's a long-term commitment if you want to have AI, see AI have an impact on your business. It's the way that KBC is approaching I think is the right way. It's long term. It takes, you have to invest, and it has to be part of the business strategy, and the CEO has to be involved. So all of these POCs have not led to the stellar results that were expected of them, and so many companies have kind of left their AI ambitions behind.
Yeah, but KBC was successful. In the preparation, you mentioned this because you always started from the value it should bring. Can you explain more to the audience? What do you mean? How do you go and search for that value?
So, you know, when you implement an AI case, you have to remember that the technology is the least important thing. So what is really important is the business definition of the use case that you're trying to solve, and you're trying to achieve in a much more profitable way. It's been proven by our staff that a very unique methodology that was developed in KBC for implementing AI cases had been shown that if you involve the data scientists and the stakeholders from the business sides from the early phase, you are able to determine and to crystallize a very coherent case that will deliver value. It's important to mention that we are not doing AI in sake of innovation. We're using innovative tools like AI for promoting our business interests. So every AI use cases in KBC provides value. That means that that my division, the AI division, is providing profit from the first day. Yeah. If you take other companies that actually choose just to experiment and actually to do innovative experiments with AI, it's a very long way until you can actually put it on a profitable route. Yeah, this is actually the main difference.
A very important point you're making. And maybe Professor Vianen, how does it fit into the digital disruption processes that you're already taking up with companies? So how does it fit in there? You know, that idea?
I think grounding the discussion around anything that has to do today with technology is so important. There is a list of terms out there that are broadly misunderstood by people. So the position that I have been taking with our customers, our students, is that you need to first ground a couple of these terms. And one thing I like to do with AI is zoom out to the broader context of digital transformation. And what is a digital transformation? That's basically a business transformation that looks for using the opportunities that technology bring to find new growth. And that can be growth within your current core, and it can be growth that is either adjacent or further from your growth. Now, artificial intelligence should be positioned as part of this journey towards recreating your organization for future growth. And I think selling AI for the sake of AI is the worst thing that you can do in a company. So make the story broader, look for value for the company, value for the customer with a view on the future, and see how technologies, that is advanced analytics technologies like AI and less advanced data usage, can help you create that future growth.
Yep, a very important statement there. And what I'd like to pick up on is the fact that maybe in the audience, there are also people already that started with AI. And a couple of phrases I hear over and over again. I would like to demystify them, just like Professor Vianen said, just to make sure that we all start with a very solid base. And maybe, Jeroen, have you ever heard in your customers statements such as, I have a lot of data, there must be something in there, go and find it?
Yes, exactly. So we get that kind of questions where they say we've been collecting lots of data, or apparently we've been collecting lots of data. Could you please have some data scientists look at it and maybe find a way to make processes more efficient or safe or generate new revenue and so on. But that's not how it works. So first, of course, the company has to decide on what it wants to achieve. Data scientists, machine learning engineers are completely helpless if they don't know which goal they are pursuing, because there are, of course, billions of ways to look at a certain big data set, for example, but you have to know what you want to achieve. Also, there's maybe the error made that AI is then the best strategy to achieve these goals, which is not necessarily the case. Obviously, Dr. Chizzy, you talked about For example, the value of having data scientists early in the process, I fully agree, but the value is often in the fact that they will say, there is no AI use case here. There's also value in that, which is often overlooked, I think.
Yeah, but the purpose is not to use AI. The purpose is to solve the business use cases.
Exactly.
And sometimes, you know, for us, good enough, it's the new perfect. I must admit that some of our most profitable use cases in AI are not combined for such a sophisticated algorithmic platform. Yeah, it's very, very simple algorithm that works well, but actually is the secret sauce, is our ability to apply a mathematical model upon a business question. And this is kind of an expertise or kind of a competence that both the business side and the data science department managed to do together. Yeah, indeed, there is a very important side or contribution to the business stakeholders, but not always the business stakeholders can actually tell you exactly what they're actually trying to achieve. Sometimes they're actually trying to say to you that with a certain insight, they can actually do an extra step and then actually refine the value. Yeah, this is something that we need to fix. Yeah, and within a special profile that we call the business integrator in KBC that works together with the data scientists and with the business stakeholders, we have managed to refine the real problem and to apply the accurate mathematical models. And after applying the model, you can actually choose a variety of solutions. AI is also one of them in order to solve it.
Yep.
Excellent input. Because basically what you're saying, and that's also a statement we hear quite a lot outside, is that just hiring a data scientist isn't enough to do AI. You really need to implicate the business. And now I might have some smaller or medium-sized companies in the audience that might say, well, that's not for us. We can't do this, what KBC has. And Stijn, have you heard this in companies saying that AI is not for us? We're a small company.
Yeah, of course. But I think the point that they're making is a futile point. What you should be thinking about is data usage. It has been said before, customer experience is value in the digital age. Now, somehow you have to admit that your customers are moving targets. They're seeing way more than what you typically see as a company. So somehow you need to staple yourself to that moving target. There is only one way to do that. You can't do that just physically. You have to somehow follow that customer in their journeys, in what they do in certain contexts. So the only way out would be to use data and analytics. Now, again, AI is like the summum of what you can apply models for or algorithms. There's a lot of stuff you can do with less advanced analytics. And before you want to fly, you first have to be able to walk. And that would be the advice I would give to small and medium-sized businesses. Start caring about data as an asset. And don't immediately try to fly, but start at ground base. That is, use descriptive, use diagnostic, and maybe some predictive analytics to see how far you can go. Now, that being said, there are SMBs that say, indeed, oh, well, we don't have the money or the skills. This is like a domain that's not for us. But you have to admit that also, whenever you buy a software package these days, there is AI in there, or at least machine learning for example, intelligent triage of cases, or for trying to speed up customer segmentation. So it is in there. So there's a risk there. If you start buying these packages, applying these algorithms without really knowing, or at least wanting to know what these things do, then you might just be outsourcing your strategy as it pertains to a lot of important decisions that you're going to make towards your customers.
Yeah, that's a very important point, that indeed algorithms are fixed by nature, and you need to have the human in the loop in order to make sure that they adapt to the changing complex world.
Well, that's a discussion that is worthwhile in any company. That is, how much do you trust to a black box algorithm? Mm-hmm. Do you want black boxes, or do you want to go for white boxes? That's worth a discussion at the top of your enterprise. You can't just delegate that down to a data scientist or an IT department. You have to have that discussion at the top of your enterprise. And then it becomes interesting, because then you're also seeing philosophical and ethical points being raised.
Yeah. And I think the point on explainability, would this help the adoption of AI in business? You know, if algorithms can, you know, open up that box, maybe not white, but let's say gray box, would that help the adoption rate?
It would help if management is savvy enough to understand what's happening there. Often in SMBs, there will be this kind of disconnect with the IT guys, as they might call them. So it's important to maybe to also, you know, in future management generations, to make sure you have digital know-how in there, and then explainability of the algorithms would help, I guess. But it's difficult to say it. You know, without knowing what the concrete challenges are, because sometimes explainability will come at the cost of the efficiency of the algorithm.
And that's a trade-off you basically need to make. Yeah. But when we talk about, you know, the customer data, and I think the word needs to be mentioned, is privacy. So what's the role of GDPR in this discussion of AI?
Yeah.
Who wants to take that question?
Well, I want to take it first. I had a discussion on that in a webinar last week with some lawyers. And there was also the senior executive VP of the digital factory at Randstad. And the first comment he made was, it has created a lot of jobs. GDPR has created a lot of jobs. Has it made our world easier? I don't think so. But if you look at what Europe is doing, because we're talking about privacy, data ownership, and how Europe looks at the issue, then I'm kind of a fan. Why? Unlike in the past, where you see regulation go very specific to almost rules and regulation, in this case, they've said, okay, we recognize that the world is very turbulent out there. The least we can do is set out some principles. Principles that are very clear to everyone, but are not a dictate towards how you're going to address these things. So they also agree that we'll need to learn how to do this. And if you look at the principles, legitimacy, transparency, being clear and limited with respect to the purpose of what you're going to use your data for, I think it's good. And the main underlying reasoning there is that as an individual, you should be able to control what is being done with your digital self. And I think it's a great principle. How we're going to do that, I think we still have a journey ahead, but there's definitely some inspiring projects, like the MIT project by Tim Berners-Lee. That's definitely an interesting element there. There is one comment I do want to make. That is, I still have the feeling that even though we're working on a principled basis for governing what we do with data, I think we should step even more away from a control attitude towards how we're going to use data, towards an innovation attitude. You still feel that at the European side, they kind of care about control, but are not able to stimulate innovation with the use of data. And you also see that with how bad we are basically in Europe to establish new unicorns. There are some tech unicorns, but the majority of the unicorns is established outside of Europe. I think there could be a regrounding there with more of an innovation focus next to the control focus that we now have in the legislation.
Yeah.
But that's my personal point of view.
So yeah, you see GDPR as like a framework in which we can act. And I think that's
absolutely.
also your point. Do you have something to add to?
I agree. I think in the short run, regulations such as GDPR and of course in the finance industry, many other frameworks of regulation it doesn't really help us to innovate, not in the way that it's set up. So it's more of a set of constraints and limitations that we're fighting against. Sometimes it seems like that. Giving a competitive edge to markets such as the Chinese market, of course, where there's much less regulation, much more innovation, much more activity. But I think that in the long run, regulation is inevitable. And so what we are learning is to set up organizations, companies, software architecture, and all of these important building blocks of our digital future. We're learning to set them up with compliance in the back of our minds, in the center of our processes, and that's worth a lot too. So I think that will give us, in the long run, a competitive edge in Europe.
Yep, so we're not squeezed just between US and China. We have a competitive edge, being that, you know, the privacy and all those compliance topics. Just maybe one more question to you. When you decide to build up your team, it's a question from the audience.
Yeah.
At a certain point in time, you decide to externalize things, internalize things. How do you make that decision? Which part do you give to an external partner, and which type of analysis do you keep inside?
That's an excellent question. We are not involving external parties in all our AI activity. Mm-hmm. This is a kind of a strategic decision that was taken on our executive committee. All the AI IP, which was built in KBC, and all the AI use cases that we are implementing are only made by in-house talents. There is no exposure of KBC data to external data for executing AI use cases. So the team are combined from AI talents or data scientists, combined with business integrators, which are all internal KBC employers. Yeah. Also, on top of that, we are not involved. We are not involving any kind of consultancy firms within our AI activity, and I think that this is actually something that helps us as a corporate to become much more mature and to be much more independent. Yeah. So we are not good customers for AI project companies, but we are actually consuming a lot of new technologies from AI startups, for companies that supply AI infrastructure. But I think that it ends up with that.
Okay. Actually, when I look through the questions, there are quite a lot of questions in the audience that go in the same direction. Namely, can you be more precise in what value it brings? You know, can you give some examples where you can show the value?
Yeah. So, you know, it's a very good question, since when I came to KBC, and I'm not, in my background, I'm not a banker, I'm not an insurance guy. So I didn't know on which domain or on which level I need to speak with the top management of KBC, because again, I'm not actually fluent on that domain. So I decided to speak on one term and use the terminology of return of investment and error. So every AI use case that we have in KBC provide values that measured by error, and we're actually measuring the profitability of our division by calculating our ROI. And I must admit that we are not doing any kind of use cases that not contribute to that KPI.
Okay, that's interesting. And how do you see this as an impact on the overall employees at KBC? Will you see a shift by putting more and more, you know,
yeah,
focus on AI?
Of course. I think that once we use this kind of KPI, which is very simple and very clear to understand, it helps us also to change the mindset of the organization, that they can actually see that it's contribute to their business line also. Yeah, it's not so easy to implement AI technology within a corporate, but what it's most challenging is to change the culture of the organization and the mindset of the people, to say that here we have a different way to do the things that we're actually used to do many years. Yeah, and this is better. Yeah, it's a kind of a very chic thing to do, and to put it directly on the face of the people that are doing so, they have to convince. And the only way that they can be convinced is by actually putting the real value and also post-calculate it after that and give them kind of a solid proof that it's actually much better. You know, if you compare, for example, the rule-based approach or the trigger-based marketing to a machine learning approach, I think in average, the results can be 4 to 5 times better in terms of sales or in terms of conversion. When you put this kind of results in front of the business stakeholders, I think that we're immediately convinced.
Okay, but of course, KBC has been collecting data. It's a bank, it's been collecting a lot of data over years. So data has often been said as the new gold. So how do you look at the importance of that data, having that data structure right, the governance around that data? Is this a discussion you also see at your other customers?
It's a discussion, and it's a hard discussion, because I think maybe Stijn will have something to say about that, because often you have Conway's law there, and which says that basically the digital output of a company often reflects the org chart of the company, and so you will see data being siloed or being locked up in generations of databases for reasons that are not motivated by the business or by the end user. It's just legacy basically. So there's a big effort of many corporates to overcome that and work towards a new data layer, if it's one way to put it, in order to facilitate these use cases. So yes, that is the groundwork that has to be done if you're serious about your digital ambitions. Not necessarily for each and every use case, because data comes pretty fast. So if you have your eyes on the prize, you know what you want to achieve. Often it's very easy to start mining that data and to just put the use case to work. That's perfectly possible, but that's not a long-term AI strategy, I would say.
Yeah, maybe can you add to this?
Yeah, the data groundworks, that's absolutely important in this context. And I have to point out that there's a huge gap between what the top management typically thinks is possible with data and what people with their boots in the mud actually feel, what they see, and the kind of difficulties they have to make data flow in the organization. There's a lot of pockets of data in an organization, but the key question with respect to does it help the customer is it clean? Can it flow? Does it cross the barriers of different silos? And there I have to admit that the reality is often worse than what the top of the organization assumes is possible, because it's easy to say, we have all the data, let's apply the algorithms. Well, still, and that's been a consistent number over all the years I've been involved in using data in algorithmics, is that 80% is still of your effort is still associated with data preparation, post-processing, and the like. Also, it was an interesting comment here. Prove the ROI of an algorithm. Well, that's easy if you say the starting point is there's a human worker, and versus the end point is we're replacing the human worker with a machine. But what if you end up with a blended situation? Then you have a lot of change management to do with the human worker, the context of the human worker. And that's harder to accomplish than just replace a human decision with a machine decision. So we have to be very careful in not oversimplifying what it takes to actually make an algorithm work in practice.
Yeah, but maybe I just want to, maybe to be more accurate. The purpose is not to calculate the ROI of the algorithm. The purpose is to calculate the ROI of the use case. And there's a huge difference between the two. And if you're actually speaking about the possibility of replacing men by machines, yeah, it's something that needs to be examined through the question. And I want to give you one example that we already published in the press. It's also very famous. It's the fact that KBC Insurance replaced the claim handling back office by machines. So in KBC, the claims are examined by machines, it's not one algorithm, it's a complete platform that actually takes the claim and actually infer whatever to accept it, yes or no, and the decision is taken by the machine. Of course, there is verification from a human being in order to see the control. And what actually it's astonishing that the model has the accuracy of 99%, which actually the claim handler is over something over 80. Yeah, and that means that we didn't focus on the algorithm itself, but we focus about the final business question. It's whatever to reject or to accept the claim. Yeah, and this is actually the main difference. You know, this is also reflect the question, and this is a very interesting one, between being data-driven or being data-led. Yeah, and I heard, you know, the discussion even in the beginning of our webinar that you discussed, for example, about the importance of segmentation, the importance of exploration, and the problem that this way of doing business, the data-led, which was very common in the last years, which also consists building a huge data warehouse that enabled the users or the stakeholders to explore the data and to understand. actually it's totally different than the new approach of being data-driven. So we are not interested about explaining the results. We are interested about predicting the conversion. And this is a huge difference. It's also stimulate a different layout of infrastructure, because you are not actually going to build a huge storage with a huge database that everything needs to be written redundantly, yeah, in a way to make it optimal. And you're avoiding in purpose in the data-driven approach for what I'm calling kind of a report obesity in the organization, that you're flying all reports all over the organization, and you enable the users to consume a lot of information, but the real action that create the conversion or the business execution always remain on the business or the manual labor effort. Yeah, and this is exactly the way how to move forward. And this is, I think, what we actually convince. It's always important to supply an explanation. Some of the explanation are required by the regulators. Some of the explanation are required by the customers. But this is something which will gradually decrease. Yeah. Just to give you one example, when you look for something in Google, are you really interested about how Google actually got to that result? I'm not so sure.
Well,
yeah?
These days we tend to care more with all the biases that we see in the data as well as in the algorithms.
Yeah, but you're more interested on the benefit rather than the explanation. It's
yeah,
also
the key question is, how do you measure the benefits?
It's very simple.
It's
very simple, because the benefit sum up or boil down to the customer's engagement to that product. Yeah, and you know, when you download an app from your Play Shop or from the app stores that you have in Apple, yeah, do you really read all the explanation? What kind of information, how they can use? No, they are not. Yeah, when somebody is engaged with Gmail, and I think that most of us actually have a Gmail account, did you read the information or what actually Google is doing with the information on the emails? How they actually train an algorithm? No, because they know, yeah, that they want to benefit from the product that's called Gmail. Yeah, I think that Google actually leverage a lot from the enormous data that they got for our emails. Yes, if you actually use the new version, you can see how efficient it is. It will not be possible without our data. Yeah, but did we actually care about it? No. Why? Because we took into our consideration that we'll gain a lot of benefit. And if somebody doesn't want to use the product, he cannot use Google, but somebody can actually allow to himself not to have a Gmail account these days? I don't think so.
Well, I have a question related to that, and it's a very interesting topic. These days, even a customer can ask to audit a company on its use of data.
Mm-hmm.
If you guys get this kind of question, how do you provide proof that what you do is, for example, GDPR proof?
We invested a lot of money and a lot of thought about supplying our customers this answer. And I must admit that, you know, during the last 5 years, KBC actually did a lot of effort about keeping the IP developed on AI, and we submitted a lot of patents. And the first patent, which was actually granted last week in the States, dealing with our ability to infer insight from transactional data, from your payment data, while keeping the privacy constraint preserved. So we take it into our first priority. Nevertheless, we can easily see that our customers are less and less interested in that actively, but we will always give them the possibility, complying with all GDPR and privacy rules, to have this kind of knowledge. Yeah, even if you actually use Facebook, you all know the triangular sign behind every post that actually explain how you actually got this post. So in KBC, we have the same manner, and we take privacy into account. Nevertheless, I must admit that as time goes by, it's exactly like searching in Google. The customers are more engaged to the benefit rather than the privacy. And I think that it's also, if you ask why you don't have unicorns in Europe, I think that the European culture are less keen to benefit, rather than the American or other nations in the world. And they are much more keen to their privacy and to keep the regulation and to go on track. It's a different style. It's a different culture, and it's also dictate what actually will be possible to do in Europe and what will not,
Very interesting observation.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at the time, I'm going to allow myself to take some more questions from the audience,
Please.
also to KBC, and also linked to what you just said.
Yeah.
You were talking about the accuracy of 99% with your algorithm. That, of course, requests clean data. And so one of the questions the audience is asking, how does KBC keep an eye on the cleanness, on the quality of their data? How do you do so? Can you explain to the audience, please?
So the way how we actually purify the data is anchored on the way how we keep the data. So in order to apply an AI algorithm, by the way, this is actually the main difference also between statistics and machine learning, because machine learning is able to deal with data which is noisy, which is not clean, which is sometimes disrupt, But we did our very most efforts in order to purify, for example, in that manner, the insurance data and make sure that every input that we're getting into our algorithm platform is sufficiently purified in order to do the task. We had also a lot of quality checks that we did both in technological manner, but also do in manual one, and we actually succeeded in doing so. Building a very solid and clean data lake, which will be the base of every AI algorithm, is one of the bases. And KBC invested a lot of resources of building that kind of infrastructure. It's one of our important pillars, and also one of my personal accountability.
Excellent. You seem to get a lot of questions here, so I'm going to allow myself to please the audience as well. What would you have done differently, looking backwards?
I think that what we did differently is that we got a very solid vision that was not established by me, it was established by our CEO. And we actually try to evaluate the situation, not by using biased approach, but using more quantitative and mathematical observation. So we did all the necessary steps that actually create us a better gradient in our revenue and better performance. So it was more engineered-like approach rather than craft. You know, when I was teaching in the university, I always explained to students what is the difference between art and engineering. So, you know, if you ask for a painter to paint a picture, so every time you'll get a different instance. In the engineering way of doing things, you'll get everything the same thing. And we actually creating an engineering methodology for creating AI scenarios and AI use cases that deliver value.
And that's a point that I'd like to take up with you, Professor Vianen. You mentioned the academia, and they are actually far ahead with AI. If you look at it, if I look at what we are doing at IMEC, how can we make sure that the translation to what business needs, there seems to be a clash between the two. How do you tackle this?
Well, it's pretty simple. Make the gap smaller. Try to get involved as an academic in projects like KBC. And KBC has a really nice track record in sponsoring PhD students at KU Leuven, for example. I think it's a good thing at universities, and that's what I noticed, is that we tend to abstract the real operationalization in companies. Why? Because the objective is often to design a new algorithm and not to experiment with the algorithm under real life conditions. I think it is at least as worthwhile as a research field to study the application of these algorithms and to develop these algorithms. So I think it's two worthwhile things, but they need to be done both. One of the parts of your question was, we can do way more in the labs than we can in reality. I think that's always been the case with technology. We're running light years ahead in the labs. The key question, however, for companies like KBC is, when is the market ready to take up a certain technology? And you need to sense and feel that, and you can even monitor that, even though I think it's going to be more like a blend between art and science than a pure science. But still, some people, like my former promoter, believe that the future will be in mapping the whole world out as an algorithm that is very complex, but still can be run like a machine, which is an interesting philosophical statement. And I think we will have multiple occasions in the future to dig into that.
I'm sure about that.
But maybe just a comment about academia. You know, in KBC, we are not just sponsoring PhD students. We also have a huge cooperation with the academia of dealing with our most advanced products. One of the example is actually Mati, which is our robo-advice platform that everybody can actually approach. You can actually look on my LinkedIn page. You can see much more details about this project has been done by KU11. They actually developed the algorithm platform. The algorithm platform was implemented by my division at KBC to create Mati. But again, there is no clash between academia and the industrial world. Yeah, the secret is how to navigate the research into more profitable or tangible results. Sometimes it's very difficult. Yeah, but once you're actually doing that, it could be very successful. I must admit that every use cases that the universities were involved with, supplying the infrastructure, creates enormous revenue for KBC. So we even proved that the value created within the university, yeah, of course KBC owns the IP, but with the knowledge of the university, it's enormous once it actually leveraged to a real life use cases. Yeah, and I think that if you actually look down for all the projects done on AI, most of the projects that actually provide real value are not actually based on really new algorithms or new papers. Most of them are actually based on things that actually developed on the 60s, on the last century. Yeah. Nevertheless, if you can actually monitor or navigate the research into that field, and it's not exist today, not on every company, yeah, but once you're actually doing that, you can be very, very successful, yeah. And you know, I'm also had a lot of trouble try also to have a communication, a direct communication with the professors actually working with me, because actually put them on that track, it's sometimes challenging, yeah, because they are stimulated more than actually discovering new things, or to actually have the most sophisticated one, and we are actually stimulating of having the profitable engine, and you have to find the right balance between the two. Yeah.
And on that point, on a profitable engine, it's easy once a case or the use case is in place to measure, you know, the difference between the baseline. But how could you coach or inspire your customers to calculate that upfront in order to make sure which case to select? How would you do that? That's one of the questions the audience is asking.
Yeah, so I think it has been said quite a few times. I think it's important not to just isolate the AI use case and try to find the ROI in just that specific vantage point. So basically, I think in broad strokes, you could say that a business needs to have goals. The goals need to be clear for everyone. And based on that, you will have what we call, we're digital product developers, it's called the product roadmap. You will have software and platforms and algorithms, all of these things, they have to be shipped. And so the agile methodology then stipulates that you want to ship as frequently as you can, and you want to measure the impact that the software and the algorithm and what impact they have on the world, so that you can learn from that and be smarter in the next iteration. So it's in the product roadmap that you learn to make priorities, that you learn where you can best invest your money and so on, and where you can actually see the world change because of the software and the algorithms that you're shipping. And it's there that you have to measure the value of what you're shipping, but it's not a one-time effort. It's not an isolated business case. It's a continuous organizational effort, basically.
Yep. So basically put a lot of effort by design before you start a project, and then iterate over and over again to make sure
keep iterating, know what the goals are, know what the KPIs are, and have everyone engaged in the same KPIs on a higher level, which doesn't mean that teams can have their own KPIs, of course, as long as they are in alignment with the company-wide goals.
Is this also how this is done? People won't like to know more about how do you build your business case? Is this in line with what you hear? How can you add additional information to this?
Again, building a use case is a joint effort together with the business. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a way that we created a balanced pipeline. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that actually the business stakeholder is being interviewed. And we try to understand or to crystallize what is actually the end goal of the business. This is something which is a little bit difficult because sometimes they cannot actually able to tell you accurately what they actually want.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can give you one example. We did a lot of sales activity, and what was interesting that to hear that the agents or KBC insurance agent really wants to have a meeting with the customer. But the meeting with the customer, it's not the final results because they were very sure that if we will have a meeting, they will be able to convince the customers to buy something. So the main goal is not actually the meeting. The main goal is to sell something, which changed dramatically the profiles that we actually ask to meet with our agent. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes it needs a little bit of a massage, but it's a different culture that you need to adapt in the organization. Yeah. Taking into account that sometimes, yeah, data has different or much more stronger say than your business belief. Yeah. It's actually being less dependent on the business expertise and more dependent on the insight driven by the data. Yeah? Not focusing on the explanation, but focusing on the probability that something will happen in the future. Yeah? And this is something which is very hard to explain in words, but it's very easy when you're actually part of the process. Yeah?
Yep. So it's integrating basically the complete company in your data-driven culture.
Yes.
That's very important. And then the top-down approach.
Yeah, it's top-down, but it's also bottom-up
Exactly.
when you actually give the people the opportunity to explore and to experiment, and actually trying to make their business belief a little bit less important, yeah, on the future use cases. It's very important to develop as a kind of a nucleus, but after that you can see, but by collecting the feedback for what you actually predicted and taking that to account to another cycle of prediction, it becomes that the knowledge actually preserved within the algorithm platform that you created. Yeah, and sometimes it's created a lot of funny events. Well, actually, people are not actually believe on the lead list that we supplied, yeah, but they actually become much more convinced when they actually see the conversion coming and also the end results.
What interests me now is, given the maturity you already are, what goals do you have put yourself for the future to come? You know, what would be your wildest dreams at the level of AI at KBC?
Yeah, but you know, this is exactly the point. We don't have dreams on the level of AI. We have dreams on the level of the business. For us, AI, it's a component. It's something that helps us to do.
Sure.
AI, it's not the purpose. Yeah, but again, we're using AI more and more to fuel our business vision. And I think that what actually was presented in the beginning of the summer by our CEO and by our Chief Innovation Officer, by Johan Tess and by Mr. Eric Lutz, is actually reflects the position of KBC to be with our customers even before the need has been expressed by themselves and to answer the need immediately. I do believe that this is the new way of doing banking and insurance. And I do believe that KBC will become a much more significant player on that event, even on other lifestyles. If you remember right, we are now enabling our customers to enjoy the soccer results from our mobile app. And it was quite amazing results, even it was expressed by the interview in the TED with Mr. Tess, how many customers engage to have it, and they were actually convinced and also engaged as a full customer. I think 1 out of 6. It's really amazing. Yeah, it's really amazing. So banks will become much more important player as we are actually perceived as the one that actually can keep your data and your money safe. And we can do nice things to create additional benefit and comfort and convenient without jeopardizing your interest.
Yeah. Excellent. And you're absolutely right on the fact that it's not AI, it's the business you need to improve. And, you know, in order to improve that business, what's the role of ecosystems? Are you see Proximus going together with Belfius, et cetera, to create new ecosystems in that direction? So what could be, you know, what could be helpful for you to have additional benefits in getting to know your customer better?
I think that as long as the data will be rich enough that we can understand and predict the customer's needs, so customers will have additional advantage. I'm not so sure about the cooperation between Proximus and Belfius, for example, or other companies, because I'm not familiar with the details. But I can tell you that every cooperation that actually yields a leverage on the richness of the data and the amount of the data that actually describe your behavior, and can actually bring you much more benefit also to the customers of that company. Nevertheless, I think that companies are not actually fully acknowledge how rich is the data they actually accumulated.
Mm-hmm.
And for them, data is not like, is something like CO2. It's kind of an added product or from their activity. And they don't see it like KBC as the oxygen that actually needs to fuel the activity and to create the energy. And this is actually the main difference. And to make a change, you have also to change your perception.
That's a very nice statement to finish off this panel discussion. I think it's also a very nice statement to the other panel leads that, you know, with this, you can go ahead and create your course. Fact that data is not just the fuel, but it's also the inspiration, it's the value that's going to bring AI further or the business further. And also for yourself, you know, making sure that companies understand that data is not just a cost, it can become a profit to a company. I would like to thank you all for listening in to the session. And I can say that Belgium is in a sweet spot for artificial intelligence, given the fact that Vlerick is also going to invest into additional courses. There are 2 books appearing on this topic. Let me just get the slide up. Okay, great. So maybe Professor Vianen, can you just explain a little bit about the content of your book that's appearing soon?
So the book is not about AI. The book is about digital transformation. And basically, a lot of the stuff that has been said about creating value with technology is very much in line with what we've heard today. That is, you have to think about your business first, your customer, and then the question is, how do you frame technology to actually optimally use that? What I've done in my book is synthesize years of research and working with companies like KBC. There's even a case on KBC in the book, to figure out how to frame taking opportunities that technology brings and make it valuable for customers and for businesses. That's basically what I do. And I zoom into strategy, I zoom into value creation, ecosystems and partnerships, and also leadership. That's a very important endpoint. Ultimately, I think what we've been discussing today, the role of data, the role of AI, trying to position it rightfully, is there to stay, and it's due time that leaders in companies try to speak that language. So that's basically why I wrote this book.
And I understand it's available now.
It's absolutely available, absolutely. Best book ever written.
Excellent, excellent. Well, there's another book coming, that's my book. My book will be on the needed translation that's there between very technology-minded people, data scientists speaking in formulas, algorithms, etc., and then business people. At the other side, we also have the citizens. And in the middle, there's nobody making sure that the translation into the different directions is done. And that's what my book is going to be about. It will be available from November onwards. Thank you very much for tuning into the seminar. I hope you find it very inspiring. Any additional questions I couldn't pick up, please feel free to contact Vlerick Management School. Thank you very much.